you sleep well? Yeah. Well, that was a little bit, yeah. Did you sleep well?
Yes, sir.
All right, and have you had a good breakfast?
Amen.
Yes, that was a good breakfast, wasn't it? And I hope you've been spiritually fed as well. Let me say this, I believe we've had two of the very best presentations I have heard. Last night, Sister Ivana, was that not good?
Yes.
Was it not a blessing?
Yes.
Yeah, and then this morning, those who were here for Gabriel's presentation, that was really quality. It really set us up for the weekend. Now we're coming to look this morning. This is the Sabbath school period. It's going to be split into two parts. I'm going to begin and reference through to the Sabbath school lesson, which is this morning. Does anyone know?
Yes.
What's the title? It's not Seeking the Lost, it is The Most. Can anyone remember? The Sabbath school lesson this morning, the most convincing proof. What is the most convincing proof?
Jesus.
How Jesus is working in and through our lives as we allow him. Now, let me go back to a start to begin with. Well, I wonder if you move. Oh, maybe I'm pressing down. So? Oh, down. Oh, yeah.
Down to go up.
Oh, down to go up. All right. Now, the starting point for all Christians is the command that Jesus gave, which we call the Great Commission. Isn't that right? And so you can take it from the end of Matthew 28, 19 and 20 at the bottom there. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing and teaching them to observe all things I've commanded you. We know that from Matthew. In Mark, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. There in Luke, preaching repentance and the remission of sins in his name to all nations. And then in Acts 1 verse 8, be witnesses to me and to the uttermost parts of the earth. That is our calling. You know, people have taken that message and put it into action over the years since Christ's death and resurrection. Let us come down to our church. We would not be here today in a church in any of your home countries and in Scotland if it had not been that somebody had gone. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Somebody had taken that message and gone. They said go. And if you look into the history of your churches, you look into the history of Glasgow or any of the big churches, Paisley, somebody went and planted a church. Somebody came to Scotland. Somebody came to the different countries we all represent. Somebody went to share the gospel. And we walk in their footsteps.
Yes, sir.
We walk in the footsteps today of those who have gone before us. I don't believe it's any accident that God has called us to be here in Scotland in the year 2018. Because God has a purpose. Now, we come from different countries. We have come here. I don't know if we actually have an indigenous Scot here this morning. I'm English. You come from, Igor, where are you from?
Latvia.
Latvia, okay. Lisa is Latvian?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Lisa, I just saw you. I was looking over the keyboard. All right, what other countries? Any from Zimbabwe? Yes. Okay. Where else do we have? What other countries? From?
Fiji.
Fiji. Well done. Ghana. Okay.
Mauritius.
Mauritius.
Guyana.
From?
Guyana.
Guyana.
Zambia.
Zambia. Anywhere else? Sorry?
Solomon Islands.
Solomon Islands. Yeah, that's good.
Amen.
And
Slovakia, Jamaica.
Jamaica.
Dominican Republic.
Dominican Republic. Wow.
Grenada.
Grenada. Isn't this a United Nations? but, why are we here in Scotland?
Exactly.
many, many reasons, but do you sense that God has called you?
Yes.
And if he's called us, has he got a purpose for us?
Yes.
Right, and it is in that go. Now, I would like to, as John there, as the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you. We have the sense of purpose of being sent. I want to challenge us this morning, okay? The mission that we all have, and it's given there in the middle, go therefore and make disciples. That's what we've been asked to do. Teach them to obey everything. Let me challenge you. I don't know if I've got this up on the screen. Yeah, I have got it on the screen. First of all, I want us to look at 3 purposes. We are to enlarge the kingdom of God to reach out. We also have to reach in to help new converts enter into the life of the disciple. Was it last Sabbath or the Sabbath before? I can't remember. But Rory, your baptism in Glasgow, was it last Sabbath? Time moves on so quickly.
Sabbath
Two
before.
Sabbaths ago,
Before.
you had 7 people being baptised. 1 from East Kilbride, 6 from Glasgow, and 1 of them was a rebaptism. But that for Scotland is huge. Back a little while previously in the summer, Paisley, you had a baptism of 5 people. That is something big. Our commission is to reach out. Sorry, I'm not doing this too well. Reach out. Yeah, reach out, reach in, and also to reconnect with those who've been converted and somehow fallen away. I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow, okay? About reconnecting with those who may have fallen away, all right? Nurture and retention is something big. But for today, I want us to begin to look at reaching out and also reaching in. If we start with reaching out, let me look at this case study. This is something that's been in the news this week, all right? This is a quotation from a young man. You guys might think I'm crazy in all this, but I think it's worth it to declare Jesus to these people. Do you know who said that? It's in the second box, so you can find it. Did you pick up the story of a young missionary who went to the Sentinelese tribe? Did you read that? His name was John Allen Chow. And he went to a tribe that were a locked-in tribe. They had no contact with the outside world. I don't know if you picked it up.
Yes.
Right, that, if you did, that young man was killed.
Mm-hmm.
He went to the island, he went to the tribe, he wanted to bring Jesus to them, and yet he was slain. He was killed. I've got a sheet here with some information about it, and it's very interesting. Those were his final words in a letter to his parents before he was killed last week by the people of the North Sentinel Island. His attempts have brought into focus the hundreds of thousands of Christians around the world who are trying to spread their faith. Was he foolhardy, or was he following God's call? What do we think? He went to an island where people did not go. They did not know Christianity. They had no contact with the outside world. They kept themselves apart. And he lost his life. Let me give you just a few statistics. Missionaries of all Christian creeds cite the Bible as the most famous passage in Matthew to go and make disciples. It's known as the Great Commission. I shared that with you. So that's what this young man went to do. He went to share his faith. According to the US Center of Studies of Global Christianity, there were 440,000 Christian missionaries working abroad in 2018. 440,000. People who had gone, who'd taken up the challenge to go. One church, which is the Church of Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, They send out missionaries as part of an ongoing program. In fact, I think you have to do a part of mission service. In 2017, that church said its missionaries baptized 233,729 converts last year. That is amazing. And we've been given the same commission to go. Something else. Another man commenting on this young man, and some people have said he was doing a wonderful thing. Others have said this was foolhardy, what he tried to do. He could have actually killed the people. They killed him because they were not used to the germs that we would bring. And even a common cold could have actually killed them. But that apart, another man commenting on the work of missionaries has said this: the best way to learn about a people is to sit in the mud with them, eat their food with them, sleep in the huts with them, rejoice in their joys with them, and go through their burdens with them.
Amen.
That's quite powerful, isn't it? One of the key principles is to try and learn the language of where people go. Now, we've moved here to Scotland. Did anyone have to learn a new language coming to Scotland? I think most of us have English today as a common language, am I right? So you all have your own home language, but most of you came speaking English. I certainly did, because I am English. But the best way to learn about a people is to sit in the mud with them, eat their food, sleep in their huts, rejoice with their joys, and go through the burdens with them. You will know the passage from the ministry of healing. All right, Christ's method alone. What was Christ's method alone? Can any of you remember?
Speak to the people.
Mingled with men as one who desired.
They're good.
Yeah. What else does it say? All right.
And you want your confidence?
Yeah. Well.
And then identify their needs.
Yeah. And then.
Make them follow me.
Follow me. All right. This man commenting said, every man or every soul matters.
Yes,
Do we believe that?
Yes.
Every soul matters. So in Scotland, how many, what's the population? Gabriel mentioned it this morning. We're about 5 million, 5.5 million
Yeah.
in Scotland. In the Scottish mission, Christianity has been there for many, many years. Part of the Reformation, John Knox, it was big. But gradually, Christianity has been declining, as it is in most of Western Europe. But we've been given the commission to go. We've been given the commission to learn about people, sit in their mud huts with them, eat the food with them, rejoice in the joys with them. Go is quite a big thing, isn't it? It's a challenge. Now we're going to come through to our lesson study this morning, and then I will pass over to Rory. The most convincing proof. All right, we've been brought to Scotland. There are 5.5 million people in our country. At the moment, as Adventists, we have 14 groups, churches or companies, and we have about 670 members. Small, but growing. Our biggest challenge is to reach out to the communities around us. Outreach. We reach in as well. We nurture those who are within our fold, but we must reach out. And the lesson study today says the most convincing proof is in the life that we allow Christ to indwell in us, and in the life that his Spirit will work through us. Last week we studied how unity is made visible through a common message centered on Jesus. The lesson says this week we focus on the visible unity of the church in its expression into the day-to-day lives of Christians and the mission of the church. Unity together as a people. Now, I haven't got time to go through the whole lesson this morning. You will have done that. On Sunday it was under the cross of Jesus. Monday the ministry of reconciliation. Then Tuesday was practical unity. And then unity amid diversity. But the one day I want to just look at for just a couple of minutes, the 5 minutes that I have left up till 10 o'clock, which Rory will then take over, is unity in mission. How do we find unity in mission? Where do we find it? We probably haven't been called, like this man, John Allen Chapel, to go over to the North Sentinelese. If we did have that burden put on it, I think we would go. But God has brought us here to Scotland. Go Scotland, we call it. We're saying we're going to be devoted, daring, decisive, working together to make him known in Scotland. All right, the unity of mission. How do we do it? When you hear those words, let me just give you some feedback. When I hear those words, unity of mission, what comes into your mind immediately? What thoughts do you have? What is unity of mission? What comes into your mind? Beaver.
Although different people have different gifts
Yes.
and probably different style of
Yes.
presenting Jesus, but all
Yes.
must come together for one goal, one objective,
Which is?
in preparing men and women for the kingdom.
And as a Seventh-day Adventist church, we share the everlasting gospel and the three angels' messages.
Yes.
Isn't that right?
Yeah.
All right. And we know from Revelation 14:12, here is the patience of the saints, those who
That
keep the
commandment of God
commandments of Jesus
and
and
faith of
the
Jesus.
faith of Jesus. All right. So, building on what Gabriel said this morning, Pastor Gabriel, he mentioned we were going to tithe our finances, our
Time.
and our
Talents.
right. Okay, we were there. Time, a tithe, our money, our finances, our time, and our talents.
Talents.
You're building on the talents, aren't you, as well? So unity in mission. We understand we've been called to share the everlasting gospel, and as Seventh-day Adventists, we have the proclamation of the three angels' messages at our core. All right, okay. The lesson brings out something about the early church. It says, in those days they were of, and it uses, does
One
anyone
accord.
know?
Yeah, one accord.
All right, one accord. That's in probably the King James. They were of one accord. What does one accord mean?
One mind,
One mind.
one objective,
One
goal.
objective. Aha, this is good. One mind, one objective.
One
Right.
goal.
Now, you're quite right, Yvonne, when you said we may witness in different ways because God has given us different talents. Some people are comfortable standing behind a pulpit and preaching. Others, you would never see them behind a pulpit preaching. If I can take my wife as an example, who's back home with her mum this morning, taking her to church, you would never ever see my wife up front speaking. That's just not what the gifts God has given her. But yesterday she was in the office with me preparing things. She's not paid as the secretary of the Scottish Mission. Carol is on vacation at the moment. But Dawn was in there with me, making sure we had things ready and prepared. We had to change room lists. We had to get different program done and everything because we had got a speaker who couldn't come. And so there was somebody who was saying, okay, I'm going to do things behind the scenes. That's what God has given me to do. All right. But whatever it is God has given us, we're saying today, as part of Go Scotland, I'm going to give my finances, my time, and my talents. And we're going to be in one accord. Now, does that believe if in one accord, we always agree on everything? No, it doesn't. All right? But we believe on, you can almost have like an outer circle and an inner circle. We believe on what is the inner circle, what is core. What is core is to share the gospel message and to proclaim the truth that God has given us. And he's called us here to Glasgow, to Paisley, to Faithfully, to Edinburgh, to Crieff, to Dunfermline, to wherever you may be. And we would want you to go back from here this weekend, and Dr. Kirk is going to be talking more about this with his presentation this afternoon, is working together on something we can do in our communities. So we can go to where God has sent us. All right, one accord. That's what seems to come through. They were also weighed, and this is where I will end, so Rory has the right time. They were weighed with the burden of the salvation of souls.
Yes.
That's what drove the early church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus had given them the commission. They had given their lives, but the reason they did it because they were weighed with the burden of souls. Now, you can be weighed with the burden of souls in a cumulative sense. And you can look at people, if you just go into Sauchiehall Street or you go into Princes Street in Edinburgh, you can see people teeming by. And you could be weighed with the burden of thinking, how are they going to know Jesus? But where I think it becomes more effective is when you look at people that you are close by at work or at university or wherever you are, and you can give a name because they're your colleague in the classroom or your person sitting in the desk opposite you, and then you've got a name, haven't you?
Yeah.
How can I share the message? One way is the most convincing proof is a loving and lovable Christian.
Yes.
You witness every day just by who you are. The last story I will share is a little booklet I have in my study, and it's called Dear Dudley, the Bridge is Out. And there is a man, and he's writing to a friend called Dudley. Dudley works with him in his office, and he's been trying to think how he can share his faith with Dudley. Well, how can he tell him what he knows to be true? And he hasn't found a way to do it. He wants to tell him about Christ. Finally, he sends him a message, and this is the message. Dear Dudley, the bridge is out. And he writes, Dear Dudley, if I were driving home this evening from work, and I was going over the bridge, let's take Edinburgh, the 3 bridges. I was going over one of the bridges, and I knew the bridge was out. I knew there was going to be a catastrophe if people went over the bridge. I would have to warn you and send back a message. Nowadays it wouldn't be a letter, it would be by email or text or whatever, to say, don't come this way, there is danger. Wouldn't that be right? He said, and yet I know the bridge of the world is out, and I haven't been able to tell you. Dear Dudley, I want to share with you the fact. The bridge is out. Whoever your Dudley is, whoever it may be that you have as a Dudley, a person, a name, Christ has asked us, go into all the world to make disciples. Unity in one accord. May God be with us.